Hey, what's up, everybody? Tom Curran and Phil Perry, and we're with you to kind of break down how the Patriots went from broken down to completely renovated in the short span of time that they have. This is a team that post-Brady looked like it was going to be in a rebuild, Phil. Well, now they're the top seed in the AFC, and it happened like that. Let's hit first the 2020 draft and talk about the scenario going into that time, post-Brady, and what they hope to get out of that draft, Phil.
Well, they didn't have a quarterback going into that draft, Tom. They had Jarrett Stidham, who they drafted in the 4th round the year before. We all thought they might draft a quarterback. They don't. They take their 1st-round pick, and they trade down. But they end up taking Kyle Duggar out of Lenoir-Rhyne Division II school. Then they get Josh Uche in the 2nd round as well. And then later on day 3, they come away with Mike Onwenu. Looks like 3 promising young players.
The wild thing about that draft is in the postscript, we're kicking rocks about them parachuting out of their 1st round. We're wondering where they swung and missed at the quarterback position, but we're at least hopeful that those 2 tight ends are going to turn into the keys. Meanwhile, Lenoir-Rhyne, Bill, we thought that he was being, again, too smart by half. It's interesting how it all panned out, isn't it?
It is, because Duggar has become one of their most important defenders. He is the ultimate Swiss Army knife. He plays linebacker for them. He plays safety. He can blitz. He can take on offensive linemen. Oh, and he can cover as well. Tom, Duggar is the closest thing they've had to Rodney Harrison in a long time.
When you look at that 2020 draft class specifically, though, Phil, how impactful was it on the Patriots' rebuild and reboot that we're seeing right now?
Well, you got one important defensive player, and you got an impactful offensive lineman, though Mike Onwenu is now their 6th guy. And he's still a critical piece, but he's not even starting for them at this point. So I would say of all the moves and all the team-building periods they've had since that 2020 draft, this has probably been the least impactful.
I'm going to agree with you there, too, and I think of Josh Uche, and I keep wondering, we see a player who does so many spectacular things in practices, and we know he's got great upside. Is there more in the tank? So I wonder if he's going to be a guy who kicks in a little bit more in contributions, but I have to agree with you. It's 3 of the 3 team-building areas. One of the key junctures was the 2021 free agency, Phil. Believe it or not, the signing of Cam Newton was pivotal because, as I reported, right before free agency began, there were players who were reticent about coming to New England because they didn't know what existed.
Yeah, it sounds odd to say now, Tom, right? Because Cam Newton's no longer here. But when we talked to Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, soon after those players were signed, they all referred back to Cam Newton and the respect that they had for him and the clout that he carries and how excited they were to play with him. So I think that was a key domino, and you get 4 key offensive pieces right there, Tom, but it wasn't just on the offensive side. They added a ton of talent on the defensive side as well.
Meanwhile, on the defensive side of the ball, they had guys coming back from opt-outs, but they also needed to increase their front 7 ability, and they did it with Matthew Judon, Devon Godshaw, and they did it a little bit on the back end too with Jalen Mills, who's been better than really you and I expected. So the Patriots, when they got into defensive free agency, they did some damage.
And we're thinking about the new names for this Patriots team, Dom, but think about all the familiar names that they brought back or re-upped, whether it's Lawrence Guy, Kyle Van Noy on the offensive side, Ted Karras, James White. These were all key pieces to what has become this iteration of the Patriots.
When we look at this entire class of free agents, both re-signed, retained, and brought in, has it been the biggest and most impactful portion of the Patriots rebuild, Phil?
I think so, because even though they got their quarterback of the future in the 2021 draft, and even though they added a couple of other pieces on draft weekend this year, I think when you look at the total team success that they're having right now in every phase and just how critical it is to all the wins they've been able to rattle off, you don't get there without the free agent class that they had.
We've discussed the 2020 draft and we've discussed 2021 free agency. Let's talk about that last team building phase, Phil. It's the 2021 draft, and my goodness, they might have gotten themselves a gem.
They did, and at number 15 overall, no less, the 5th of 5 quarterbacks taken in the 1st round, Mac Jones has been the perfect fit for this Patriots offense. They want somebody who gets the football out quickly, who makes good decisions, who takes care of the football, Tom, and Mac Jones does all of those things. They didn't have to trade up to get him. They sat there at 15. He fell right into their laps.
I think what's interesting is, what does the drafting of Mac Jones mean for Phil in February, March, and April over the next 6 to 10 years? because Phil devoted his life to quarterback spelunking in the draft. And what would the Patriots do? And now we don't have to wonder anymore, do we?
That's right, Tom. What will the people do without their profiles of everyone from Mike White to Kyle Lauletta to Davis Mills? It'll be a lot of fun to look at some other positions. And Tom, they didn't just hit at the quarterback position in this 2021 draft. In the second round, Christian Barmore, they trade away 2 fourth-round picks, an overpay, it was considered by some, to move up the board and get Mac Jones' teammate, Christian Barmore, who has been a massive find.
Bill Belichick has been a personnel pinata for us from 2014 really, through 2020. Maybe we could even stretch it back to 2013, both in free agency and in the draft. Of course, there have been guys brought aboard like J.C. Jackson or Jonathan Jones, Malcolm Butler. There have been draft hits like Trey Flowers. But by and large, there had been many misses in free agency and the draft that kind of landed them in that place where they needed to do a post-Brady rebuild. Did Bill change the narrative as to him being a GM who sometimes kneecapped himself as a coach?
There's no doubt he's in the conversation for Executive of the Year. I'm not sure he's even eligible for that award, but he should be based on what he did in free agency, what he's done in the draft to get Mac Jones, to get Christian Barmore, and then Ramondre Stevenson in the 4th round. Ronnie Perkins was the 3rd round pick, who we haven't yet seen because they're so deep at outside linebacker. But Ramondre Stevenson has changed the way they've been able to move the football offensively. So it's been a while, Tom, since the Patriots, or really most teams, have had a draft class that looks as deep as the 2021 version for the Patriots.
We'll see if what happened in 2020 and 2021 have set the stage for another amazing decade of Patriots football.